What is up, guys? It is the Scarlet Duelist back again with yet another deck profile that I am confident calling pretty good. This is a deck of my own invention that's actually seen some decent regional success in the past. If you have followed my channel back then, you know that this deck actually came in 70-ish out of around 350 people, and for it being a deck that, nobody knows about or cares about, going up against things like Danger, Thunder, 75 Negate, You Can't Play deck, Full Power Striker, and so on, I'd say that's not too bad, especially at the regional level. So yeah, I think that it's kind of shown that it can play. Like it can play with the big boys, I guess you should say. It was really I don't feel comfortable with the fact that I said that because that just is like a lame phrase, but we're just gonna keep it. It happened. Here we are. You get what you get. Still pretty good, right? So anyway, what I've done is taken that and just kind of improve upon it by making that end goal easier. And yeah, I think that's pretty much all I wanted to say. Oh, well, I guess to talk about why it can be even more successful, simply the fact that the format's changed a little bit. People are not necessarily going for 93 negates. People are just putting up 2 or 3 interruptions that are solid, and some of them are lingering interruptions that make it hard for your opponent to play, and this deck can do that too. So I think that's just kind of the play style that is Yu-Gi-Oh right now. Like this deck can make it really difficult for your opponent to play, and you don't have to play solitaire for 20 minutes to do that. So without further ado, let's start the profile. Of course, when you're playing the Invoked archetype, if you're not playing 3 Aleister, you probably are doing it wrong. So we've got 3 of Aleister because it's the card that we definitely want to see. It's not the end of the world if we don't. We can play a little, but it's definitely going to be suboptimal. So we've maximized our ability to see Aleister. Then we've got 3 Photon Thrasher. This is a light target engrave, and it's also a special summon so that we can quickly make a redoer and so on. So really good card. That's why it's at 3, one of the best that you can see. The next best, of course, is 3 Ranryu, because it is a wind archetype. You can also use this to end on a Raijin, which I actually prefer over a Makaba because I don't lose a card advantage. That was a weird way to say that. I don't lose any card advantage by activating Raijin and interrupting my opponent, whereas Makaba, you have to be really strategic about when you make him. Because if you make that, you just have to be ready to lose card advantage to interrupt your opponent. Now, if you have card advantage to spare, not a big deal. If you don't, I would recommend not making it if possible to avoid it. But anyway, Ranryu, really useful card, and it special summons itself if there's a spellcaster, and our boy Aleister here is a spellcaster. Same deal with Gigabyte, making and I never can say it, comment how you pronounce this, honestly, because it looks like cocitis or cocytus, but I've heard some people say cocytus, but I don't like saying that. It sounds like a disease. So I don't know. The invoked water one is what I'm saying for now, but you can make that, and it's pretty tough for your opponent to deal with because I believe it cannot be targeted or destroyed, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it cannot be. Wait, here I go again. Here I go. Here I go. Here I go again. I want to be correct. Yeah. Cannot be destroyed by your opponent's card effects, and your opponent cannot target. Yeah, cannot be targeted or destroyed. Sorry about doing that in the middle of the video. I just wanted to be sure that I wasn't giving you false information. So yeah, you'll have a redoer and the one that sounds like a disease on your field for your opponent to deal with. They're probably going to want to take care of your redoer and not necessarily be able to deal with your Gigabyte, unless of course they're an Orchest player and then they annoy everyone by sending it to the grave. So that's a thing. But not the end of the world if they do. They had to use it for that. You know what I mean? It's one of those make them have it situations. You had to make them have it. Next, we've got another inherent summon with Kage to Kage. Although it's not really an inherent summon, but there is no dark version of the familiar monsters that special summon when a spellcaster is out. They might make one, but they might be too scared to make one, to be honest, because there is no light one and there is no dark one, hence why I'm using Photon Thrasher and Kage to Kage. So we'll see if they end up making those in the future. If they do, we'll probably replace both Photon Thrasher and Kage to Kage with those. But for now, these work. The only danger about Kage to Kage is that it can be interrupted and miss its timing. However, if it does end up, getting negated or something and in the grave, you can still use it as a fusion material in the grave to make a Kaliga. So it's not the end of the world, it's just not ideal. That's why it's only at 2. And then finally we have 1 Inari Fire. Because this is a going first build, we're not necessarily wanting to make, and I say necessarily, you're not ever making a Purgatrio going first. If you do, your opponent's probably going to out it, and then you lost your Purgatrio, because we only run 1 in this build, because we only bring out the Purgatrio when we know we're ready to OTK. Next, we've got 2 Time Thief Winder. This is really interesting because it can special summon itself by discarding a card from an Exceeds monster already on the field. And then when it is special summoned or normal summoned, it searches one of your Time Thief spells and traps. So this one's only in here at 2. Wow, that was a weird stutter. This one's only in here at 2 because it's kind of a brick. But if you have your setup and then see it, it's useful. It's one of those things that I guess the best way to say it is I want to see it when I want to see it. And it does help search out the trap, which is really nice as an interruption. So that's something. It's unfortunate that the Time Thief cards are actually pretty clunky. So this is the only Time Thief monster that I've gone with in this build. Regulator is really high risk, high reward. But then if I regulate, I'm not going to be able to use Aleister at all. And a singular Redoer is not really going to do it for me. So that's why we have just the Winder. Bezel Ship is the worst of them all, so we're not even playing it. Then we've got 2 Iron Dragon Tiamaton. I love this card, especially in this deck, because we can almost guarantee that we have 3 cards in a column, which means we can special summon this going first and lock our opponent out of their extra deck monster zone, which means they have to deal with it. And if they don't, next turn it's another Exceeds material, it's a level 4, or we can just use it as a 2000 beater. It's a really useful card. It's also very good against pendulums if you want to just bring this out on one of their pendulum zones and lock them out of it, and they're going to have a hard time playing without it because a lot of their combos rely on pendulum summoning, obviously. Of course, Endymion will be able to find a way to out it, but that's the thing. They're going to have to use their resources and spend them on getting rid of this card. So that's the strategy behind having Tiamaton in there. It's not because it's a board-breaking, incredible card that your opponent will never be able to deal with, but the thing that it does well is it makes your opponent focus on it and not the rest of your cards, and they're going to have to figure that out before they do anything else. So then we have 3 Ash. This is good, and it synergizes because A, it's just a good interruption, and yes, I have a proxied Ash. I'll talk about that in a moment. This is a good interruption, obviously, because you know what Ash does, and then it becomes a fire target in grave for when we do want to OTK with a Purgatrio. And for those that are not used to my channel and you haven't seen my profiles before, I do use proxies in my deck profiles, but only for cards that I already own, and I only put that many copies that I already own in the deck. Like I already own 3 Ash, but I put 3 printouts of Ash in here for the simple reason that I like having decks ready to be able to be played with friends rather than having to move cards around all the time. So even for my deck profiles, why not just have a proxy in there? It's a lot easier than moving my cards around all the time. But like I said, I do not just print out cards that I have not already purchased myself, and I definitely don't print out more copies than I truly own for a deck. So just to clear that up with my new viewers that see this, if this does bother you, sorry, but also I don't think it's that big of a deal. If you're bothered, get out of here, you know? But yeah, that's kind of the brief spiel on proxies for you. There will be a few. So then we've got I think we only have 2. Yeah, we'll just go with them. We've got our traps, only 2, Time Thief, Flyback. This card is a really good interruption, and I'm playing around with maybe upping this to 3, and maybe throwing in some other traps too, just why not? But the thing is, the reason I don't have a ton of traps is because the deck really relies on a lot of its monsters, and you need to see a lot of combo pieces in this deck. So you don't want to open on just your interruptions. Like if I open on a Flyback and an Ash, that means the other 3 cards have to be able to accomplish my goal, which is not too far-fetched, but it decreases my chances of seeing combo pieces if I put in thousands of interruptee anticipate my opponent cards, you know what I'm saying? So yeah, play with that as you will, but that's kind of my point of view on it. Then we've got 1 Upstart Goblin. We're in the spells now. one Book of Law, and one Double or Nothing. So Double or Nothing is really nice unless you draw it, but it's still, you can make your Utopia go up to 5,000. What's cool about this is if you do end up, if your opponent, I can't even speak. You're not going to win every die roll. So if your opponent bricks or you've outed parts of their board and can make a Utopia double, you can just get game quicker. So that's the mindset behind that. It also helps to just get over high attack monsters and so on. So that's why Double or Nothing is here. I love that play. It steals wins all the time, which is really nice. Our final one of with spells is Time Thief Hack. We can search that with our Winder, I believe is what it's called. I'm drawing a blank now. It's not even in that stack. Let me make sure I'm saying the right. Yeah, Winder. It searches our Time Thief Hack. This is really nice because it means during the turn that they are special summoned, your Xyz monsters are protected. And this allows your Redoer to attack directly too, as long as it has material that's been gathered by your opponent. A lot of people write this card off, but as a 1, it's not bad because you can search it a lot of the time or get to it eventually because your Redoer gets you draw power and so on. But yeah, this has won me some games too because I've had some untouchable monsters to deal with, and then I was like, all right, I guess I'm just not going to deal with them. And then I made a Redoer that could attack directly, and that's what stole the game. Finally, we've got some of our 2-0s. We've got Super Poly because as long as we have an Aleister and an opponent's card, because like I said, we're not going to always go first. Like, you're not going to win every die roll. You don't want to be screwed because you lost a die roll. Super Poly really comes in clutch because you can just summon your Aleister and activate Super Poly and then take your opponent's monsters that way. And even if you open on this first, it's not totally dead because if you have an invoked monster and your opponent special summons a monster from the extra deck, you can use Super Poly to make an Elysium. So you're going to get rid of their monster, and then Elysium will banish the rest of their monsters, and then hopefully you'll have a follow-up play. But either way, they're pretty screwed at that point, which is pretty nice. Then we've got 2 instant fusion. This allows us to make our Mud Dragon or an emergency Kaliga if it calls for it. It just isn't basically a free level 4 special summon in this deck. We're not using it to make Restrict and then Link Karibo or anything like that. It's simply a free level 4. Then we've got 2 Invocation because it's searchable and it recycles itself. You know what this does. If you clicked on this for Invoked, hopefully you have an idea of what they do. Then we've got 1 Terraforming and 3 Magical Meltdown, which Terraforming is just another copy of Magical Meltdown because as much as I've been back and forth with having this at 2 versus 3, it's hard because you want to maximize your chances of seeing Aleister, and I will say the reward of being able to max out my copies of Aleister significantly outweigh the risk of opening on multiple and bricking. Honestly, you want to be sure that you can consistently get to Aleister, and this is the best way to do it. Unfortunately, does it brick sometimes? Yes, but not enough to warrant knocking it down to 2. Then we finally have 3 Called by the Grave, just because hand traps do hurt. We are normal summon reliant with this deck a little bit. I mean, by a little bit, I mean a lot of bit, because this is our main combo piece. You've got to get that normal summon off, which means, you might consider running things like Red Reboot or What So? I don't know what I was thinking there. Or I don't even know what I was going to say. What was What So going to turn into, Or whatever, I think is where I was headed. Run Red Reboot or some back row hate just to make sure, because if this gets negated or stopped or interrupted going second, that's, it hurts. But obviously our main goal is to go first. So we've got a nice balance here. We're optimized for going first, but we're not screwed if we have to go second entirely. And that's the main deck. Now let's jump into the extra deck. So of course we have I'll just pull those out. We've got 2 Time Thief Redoer. 3, I rarely make 3, honestly. But if you want to put in a 3rd for some of these other choices, you can. But usually 2 is enough. I usually don't need more than that. I haven't yet, so I haven't felt the need to put in the 3rd. If you're like, no, this is a Time Thief deck, we're putting in 3. Do it, I guess. But yeah, it does what it does. It's depending on the material it has, it's a great interrupter and just extender and so on. So that's really nice. Then we've got Salamangreat Almirage. Then we've got Aleister, the Invoker of Madness. And then we've got our Utopia double package. So that's good to go already. Almirage is great if you do end up going second and only have an Aleister. As long as they don't interrupt you, you can turn this into a Purgatrio and start removing and trying to OTK. So that's really nice to have. Invoker of Madness is insane. It just allows you to keep making fusion summon plays, which is awesome, as long as you're not anticipating Nibiru, because you're going to have, you're going to be summoning a lot, so just be careful with that. But he's really good at searching out things like Book of Law for when you are about to try and OTK your opponent. Then we've got Mud Dragon of the Swamp. That's a target for instant fusion. It can be used to make an Exceeds material, then you banish your Redoer, then it's a material to make the one that sounds like a disease, the Invoked monster, because it's a water type. So pretty good. Then we've got 2 Kaliga because we've got a lot of dark types. I think we have 4 dark type monsters, not including Aleister. So the most you have is dark. What's cool about that is Kaliga is really tough for the current format to play through because it only lets them attack once and it only lets them activate a monster effect once. Does that affect you too? Yes, but you're going to make it turn 1. It's going to stall them. Then turn 2, you're going to overlay this into hopefully a Utopia double or Utopia or even another Redoer. And you're just going to keep flying with your plays. And even if not, you can also throw in an Abyss Dweller or some other Exceeds monster that you think would be effective, because it's not as though this keeps going after it's gone. As soon as you get this off the field, you're free from its effects. So it's a really underrated card. It stops your opponent from playing in stalls, and that's why I have 2. It's really good. Then we've got Invoked Disease here. This is, again, it's a tough one for your opponent to get past if they're not anticipating something that cannot be targeted or destroyed. It's got a big beefy defense and it can attack while it's in defense mode, which is pretty cool. Better than nothing, right? Then you've got Invoked Raijin, which I think is the best interruption personally. So this is the one that it's my favorite one to end on, because I don't lose card advantage by interrupting my opponent, and it's even able to be used going second with instant fusion. So again, if you lose the die roll, worst case scenario, you make a Raijin, flip away, or bait out the negate or whatever with a Raijin, trying to flip it face down and so on, and you can keep going with your plays. Then we've got 1 Purgatrio from we're ready to OTK because it's a beast. It's really good when used in tandem with the Book of Law to bring out another invoked monster. We have 2 Makaba because I've never needed 3, to be honest. I guess occasionally if you want to have enough in there and throw in the Calamities play, you can, but that uses a ton of your cards. You're going to play your whole hand to get that play off. And in this format, that just decks will beat you just out of pure card advantage and being able to play longer than you. So we want to kind of use this sparingly and only at the right time. And finally, we've got Invoked Elysium, which is an amazing removal card, especially with Super Poly out there, because you get to remove things from their board twice. So yeah, that's the extra deck. And now we'll talk a little bit about the side deck. I don't even remember what's in my side deck at this point, because this side really depends on what event you go to. So what I'm about to show you, you should not even build your side deck to be, because it's going to depend on where you're headed. If you're going to locals, usually you have an idea of what's there. You're going to side differently. If you're going to regionals, you're going to anticipate. I mean, that's the hardest thing I think to anticipate, is because there's an infinite amount of rogue and meta. And then obviously YCS, there are things that you're going to anticipate more of and so on. But for now, I'll give you an idea of this deck's weaknesses. So you want back row hate. So I've got 2 Twin Twister, and then I've got 2 Pankratops just to be, blanket removal. Then if I am going against graveyard heavy decks, I also have an Abyss Dweller. And because I have terraforming and going second is sometimes hard, I threw in a Mystic Mine as well, just 1. And then some other good going second cards. I've got 2 Herald of the Abyss, 3 Mind Control, 2 Kaijus. The reason I didn't go with Nibiru is because I cannot afford it, and Raw Sphere mode is not good in this deck because I need to normal summon, and Raw Sphere mode takes away my normal summon. So these are okay because I can put them on my opponent's board, out them, and then they're still able to be fusion materials for some invoked monsters. And then I have 2 DD Crow, just because, again, graveyards are a thing. A lot of decks right now rely on them, rogue and competitive. So that's kind of just my ramsham side deck. But again, don't take this as this should be your side deck always, because that's not the case. Depends on what type of event you're going to. But as far as things that maybe I would side out, I would probably, if I'm going second instead of first, I might cut back on the Kage Tokages because that being interrupted on top of other things, like you don't want to be interrupted even more going second. I might take out the Iron Dragons, although those might be good going second, I guess, but probably not. Um, let's see. Honestly, it just depends on the matchup too. I want to have, oh, obviously you're going to keep that in going second. Um, yeah, I mean, you could really cut any number of things. It truly depends on what you're going to add in instead, and it depends on what your matchups are. So I never have a great way to give advice on side decking and so on for my decks, just because that's so dependent on what you're playing against. I'm talking in circles. I'll stop. But yeah, guys, that's the deck. I hope you enjoyed it. It is one of my favorites, and again, I've had it see a lot of success against meta and rogue, which is really cool. So hopefully you enjoy it. Take this, have fun with it, or don't. I don't know. Do what you want. If you really like my channel and you plan on going shopping for some cards, if you use TCG Player already, for no extra cost to you, if you use the link in my description, what that will do is nothing will happen to you, but it will help me a little bit by giving me just a little bit of kickback, which allows me to buy more cards to make more profiles for you guys. So again, it's literally just one extra step of going to the link in my description, clicking that, and buying your cards that you were planning on buying anyway. No extra cost to you, no code, no anything. There you go. And also, if you are interested in buying my art as a playmat, the link is also in the description there. There's only one piece of artwork of mine up right now, just because copyright things are a thing. I have to make sure that some of the other artwork that I'm working on for those is able to be used, but there will be more coming. So yeah, if you like the video, give it a like. Like I said, consider supporting the channel in ways that I just mentioned. Subscribe, and see ya.